I actually do have a bit of a hot take though, and I'm curious. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this. But I've been thinking about how could they have fixed this? Like this situation where the game came out, no one really liked the story, the gameplay was just too repetitive. How could they have like turned that around? Because we can sit and talk for hours about like what the game should have been. Like it should have built on the dual play system of Arkham Knight. It should have had a much better story. Maybe it shouldn't have even been a Suicide Squad game. But at the end of the day, we got the game we got. I think that their approach should have been first apologizing to the community. We have David Zaslav on the quarterly earnings calls saying, yeah, this game was a complete disaster. But then publicly, they're still pumping out content. They're still nickel and diming the in-game store. So that feels like an inconsistent approach. So I think first they should have just apologized to the community, said, we recognize that this wasn't the game that you wanted, and we're going to turn it around. Now, the other option is they could have just completely canned the game, recognized that it wasn't working, and gone on to do like an Arkham Asylum remake or something. But if they really wanted to stick with this game and making content, I think they should have just delayed every piece of post-launch content and reworked it into like a 2.0 patch where they rebrand it into Suicide Squad Save the Justice League. It's like 3 additional hours of story that's more fun, where you're going around and saving your favorite heroes instead of killing them. And, you know, they could have added so many cool things. They could have added a PvP mode. They could have added 4 new playable characters at launch that you don't have to buy. They could have added all the cosmetics and emotes for free. They could have added some support squad missions where like Bizarro and Metallo and Parasite are in Metropolis and you have to go fight them. I think that should have been the approach, like looking at the feedback, what fans actually wanted to see. And I think they could have turned this into an 8 out of 10 game, but instead they just keep digging themselves into a deeper hole by adding more content that no one wants.
I have an idea. Marcel, do you want to go?
No, go ahead. What's your idea?
My idea is, I mean, Jake, you pretty much just said this, but I completely agree that what the game could have been is think Gotham City Imposters of PvP, right? Where two characters, think of basically, here's the best way to describe it. Overwatch with DC villains, right? That could have worked. That could have, and you actually could have made a whole story about DC villains fighting each other, almost like an Injustice style of thing, I guess, in terms of the story. But it could have been like, it could have been like, I don't know, the Joker versus insert villain, Lex Luthor. I don't know. Yeah. And like,
a good,
you know what I'm saying?
Good way to, a good way to do that would be like Brainiac just pulls them from the multiverse. You're fighting as like multiple different versions of like Parasite or like Joker, and you go in there and fight like, you know, the Suicide Squad. And, you know, you have your own version of the Suicide Squad. That would be cool. That would be actually
and then
really
you
neat.
build in a PvP component, because the thing about all these games that have games as a service that make a unbelievable amount of money is that almost all of them have multiplayer. It's PvP. People aren't getting on Call of Duty and Fortnite and all these games and spending billions of dollars on microtransactions to shoot AI. You know, this isn't like 2012. You know, I mean, that was the thing for a little bit. Even Destiny, which was known for streamlining that sort of gameplay loop of the PvE looter shooter mining for gear and that kind of thing. I mean, that had PvP too. People forget that. And so, you know, for this sort of game, it doesn't have any depth to it in the PvE component. And by the way, it's the same problem with Marvel's Avengers. It's the same thing. And so that's the thing that behooves you the most about this game is you look at it basically just repeated the same mistakes as Marvel's Avengers. It was the same exact problem. Marvel's Avengers could have been something if there was a PvP, almost like in Battlefield 2, you have the Jedi versus Jedi heroes versus villains, whatever it's called, mode. You know what I'm saying? So that could have made it more interesting. And so if each of the characters had a gameplay loop similar to Overwatch, and it was like fighting against other human beings playing as these characters, that would have at least been interesting. But of course, that would require more gameplay novelty, and Killer Shark, you know, can't have a machine gun. That doesn't make sense. He would have to be a brawler, and it would be more complicated to make. So, so yeah, I mean, the PvE sort of wave-based looter shooter stuff is so tired. Every game since 2015 that's done it has flopped, as far as I'm aware. So I don't know why you would repeat that, but.
Well, I don't think with the current team at Rocksteady, if we're going by, you know, all history, they're doing the same thing. They have the same story. Sefton Hill, Jamie Walker left, and we're left with the team that is actually still there. I don't think they could have done anything to save this game, honestly. Like, they could try, like the first thing that you said, Jake, repackaging the story and whatnot, and, you know, kind of bringing it out as something new. that could work, but the people there didn't even want to do multiplayer. So like, would they really even be able to? And does WB even, would they even be able to, get WB on their side to do that? And also, I think just after the story, if they stick with that same story afterwards, what to do to save this game, man, if they took a 6-month, 7-month hiatus, that shit's it's gonna kill the game immediately. I mean, like, the way it came out already, it would have been like under 20 players on Steam by the time they put out their first DLC thing, and maybe it would have gone up like a little bit. I don't think it would have saved the game though. Like, no matter what it would have done.
But I think what Jake is getting at though is that it wouldn't save it in the end. But if I'm understanding your question right, it's more like, how could you have fixed it in the framing of it,
right?
Like in the entire concept.
I just, like, honestly, with the thing that they did, the concept, the gameplay that they did, the only thing that they could do is just introduce more or different bosses, different enemy types, and like actually doing something like that in a way. But the gameplay within itself and the story that it follows, it's so hard to even, like, in many ways redeem that. And I don't even know if bringing back Batman and doing all this stuff, plus if they already had a plan in mind with Kevin Conroy's Batman, they already recorded stuff, it would kind of, I guess it would be kind of hard to like rework that in many ways, or even like rework the whole story by bringing in like the former actors or whatnot. So I think they would have to be stuck with what they had, and it would have been maybe even worse than what we got, which is, I mean, it wouldn't be that surprising, honestly. But like, right now, they're doing their best, but they're doing shit. It's really bad. Like, I can't see any way of this game ever redeeming. Like, there's no timeline where this game could have been redeemed from where it kind of released.
It's a weird situation because live service, the whole idea is that it's something that can improve and evolve over time based on feedback. But reading Jason Schreier's article on it, the whole, like, the developers don't even really know how to implement new features to the game. Not because they're not talented or great developers, but because the way that Jamie Walker and Sefton Hill captained the ship, they implemented so many hot fixes that weren't like true fixes to the code, that it's just this bloated mess of a game that the developers really, I think, have just struggled trying to implement new things into. And it's such an interesting situation that we find ourselves in with live service superhero games, because I'll be honest, I'm not 100% opposed to the idea. Like, if Arkham Knight was still getting content to this day, where it was like, they're going to add Prometheus and Bane into the side missions of the game, and there's new challenge maps and cosmetics, I would be there. If they added a multiplayer mode to the game, I'd play it. If Spider-Man 2 did the same thing, where they said every single month we're going to add a 2-hour-long DLC for the next 6 months. The first 3 will focus on Peter Parker's early days as Spider-Man, and then the next 3 will focus on Miles after the story of Spider-Man 2. Like, I like the idea of games continuing to receive updates, but the problem is that in the case of Marvel's Avengers and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, we're seeing these companies that almost treat it more like an infinite money glitch. Like, oh, we can just reskin these missions and sell them again, and people will be
right. It's like, I'm not going to do extra work, but we're going to make more money. Yep.
Yes.
You know what's a good argument for the live service for superheroes is games like Marvel's Rivals. I don't know if you guys have seen the gameplay. I literally put like maybe 25, 26 hours on the closed like alpha that they had or whatever. And they have like another beta coming out next month on consoles. So definitely try to get a code, because that game is like a lot of fun. And it's in the same vein of like Overwatch, where they're probably going to make the most money off of skins. And that's a really good idea for the superheroes. Just have a free to play PvP game that's almost identical to like Overwatch. Have these spectacular characters do like crazy shit, and have like, good time with your friends, and then buy some skins. And I think that format right there is actually a good way to do it, because that game is actually fun. There's things that are actually of value in that game, and I could actually see that game being popular in like, a live service type of way. And with games like, Suicide Squad, they don't really have much to offer. Like, their skins are trash. The story is garbage. The gameplay is repetitive. It's not fun. They don't add anything new in a DLC. It's just the same fucking shit over and over with reskinned guns and reskin characters. But at least with like, that Overwatch clone, they could add new maps. They could add new game modes. They could add all these different things to that type of stuff, and kind of like make the game's longevity like a lot, more than what it would be if it was like Suicide Squad. So I think Overwatch type of clones like that, I think DC needs to jump on that immediately, because they could easily do something exactly like Marvel Rivals and like make so much more money than what they made with Suicide Squad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how long has DC Universe Online been around? Like, even that was a game that catered more to what players wanted to see from a multiplayer game.
Right. Yeah, that's been out for like decades, like
Yeah.
20 years, I'm sure.
Well, I think that hopefully they're moving on soon. I mean, really, I implore, just like, please, just put yourself out of your misery, move on to the next, just take your L and move on. That's fine. Like, we all take L's in life. Happens. Take your L and move on. Stop trying to resist it. There's nothing that will save this game. Nothing. I mean, even if what Miller said is true, which it's not, because it hasn't happened, that the whole story is going to get fixed. Nobody cares because there's under 100 people playing the game. Let's say the new DLC pack comes out. You're lucky if you get 5,000 people. I don't even see that happening. I think it'll be probably around 1,000. If you get 1,000 people, okay, but how many millions of people saw on Twitter Batman being unceremoniously murked? What percentage of those millions of people are ever going to find out that the story was quote unquote fixed here? So you can't fix it. You can't.
Well, yeah, because the main game story didn't tease a comeback. That's like, if they wanted to have people like return from all the characters, the game should have ended with them like saving the Flash or something, or at least setting a precedent of like, we just learned that Flash is actually alive or something. And that's how they should have ended that story if that's how they wanted to tease it. But I'm with you. Like, I'm not super excited to save Batman in a motion comic down the line.
Motion comic, and then he's gonna have 4 minutes of dialogue in a cutscene where he just gets locked up in like a prison or something, and then you get to talk to him. Optional dialogue in the Hall of Justice. I've been saying this. They're gonna just be optional dialogue in the Hall of Justice. They're not gonna be anything else.
Yeah, no, I'm with Kobe. I think that they need to move on. I actually, if they want a quick turnaround to kind of regain some public favor, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and really, I feel like doing an Arkham Asylum remake might be the best way to go, just because that's something that they've already done. It's something that, you don't necessarily have to go like re-record all the lines. Even you could do what they did with The Last of Us Part 1 in 2023 or 2022, whenever that one came out. And so you just take all the original assets from that game where you have Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill's dialogue, and you just rebuild it from the ground up in Unreal Engine 5. Maybe you like reimagine some of the missions or boss fights to play out a little bit differently. You take some of the criticism that game got back in the day to heart, and like, that would be a great way for them to not have to spend the next 5 years figuring out what the next game is going to be and then another 5 actually developing it. That's a game that I could see them putting together in 2 to 3 years as they figure out, what they want to do after that. But that might be a good way to fix some of the public relations that have been lost with Suicide Squad.
Yeah, it's either that or just make a whole like brand new franchise, like revolving around the Arkham name. Bring in Roger Craig Smith and just or I guess kind of just like reboot it from the very get-go, make a whole new franchise. But it's so hard because their public reception, like Kobe said, they've gone from 10 out of 10 games, like almost 3 bangers in a row. Everybody can argue that Arkham Knight's like, mid or whatever, the boss battles. But that game,
in terms it's 9 out of 10.
It's a 9 out of 10. No, but like the whole public reception of like IGN and all that stuff, it was all 10 out of 10s on the mainstream review forums. So in terms of public reception, those games are 10 out of 10s. And then you come over to freaking Suicide Squad, and it's like most critics gave it like a 4 or 5. Most people gave it like a 3, 4.
Back to the broader question that Jake asked on the how the game could have been saved is, I actually do think there's a way, like if you brought back Mark Hamill and put him as the face of the game, and it's basically Arkham versus Joker, and maybe you set the game before Arkham City, obviously he's dead. And granted, everybody would cry and complain, oh my God, Joker, all they do is make money in the Joker. Okay, well, they used King Shark and we saw how that worked out. Okay, so maybe they should actually stick to the Joker. That's just my opinion. So, basically, if they had some game that's like led by the Joker set before the events of Arkham City, and it's like this vast villains versus villains kind of thing, and you can bring in every single villain and make it like Overwatch with DC. I mean, that could have been really interesting. And I know Marvel's doing their own version of Overwatch and that kind of thing, but I could see that really working, especially if there is a plot set in the Arkhamverse that involves these characters that we really like. But that's another problem that they essentially did, is that they followed up the events of Batman Arkham Knight, but didn't bring in any of the characters that we actually like. You know what I'm saying? So we didn't see Tim Drake and Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon or really anybody that we had made connections with in the Arkhamverse. And we saw Batman for 5 minutes to get shot in the face. That doesn't count. And so really, in the grand scheme of things, it's not really a sequel to Arkham Knight, versus they could have made it a little bit more connected to Arkham in that regard. So again, I think that probably would have been an example of a direction to take it that people would have complained about, but then the game would have came out and liked it, versus this game, which was everybody was excited for the game and like, oh my God, they're doing something different. Finally, no more Batman, no more. And then we actually got it, and then nobody played it, so it would have been an inverse.
Yeah, I get that. Suicide Squad.